The Trojan War. To best understand the adventures of Ulysses on his way back to Ithaca, we must first take a look at his story from the beginning. The beginning is, however, a very vague concept, since to trace the true beginning one would have to stretch to the beginning of time itself. You see, the beginning of Ulysses' story has really nothing at all to do with him, and everything to do with a certain wedding party atop Mount Olympus. So, let us begin there. It all started with a wedding. Zeus, the leader of the gods on Mount Olympus and the most powerful god, had an eye for Thetis, a very beautiful sea nymph. He could not marry her, however, because it was prophesied that any son born of Thetis would become greater than his father. Since Zeus could not stand the thought of someone becoming a greater god than himself, he decided that he would marry her to a mortal. It was at the wedding feast of Thetis and her mortal husband that the real trouble started. You see, gods like to hold grudges and are very easily offended. It so happened that Eris, the goddess of discord, was not invited to the wedding. This really ticked her off, so she decided to cook up a little trouble for the gods. She created a beautiful golden apple and inscribed the apple with the saying, "To the fairest," and placed the apple in the middle of the table, upon which the rest of the gods were feasting. Immediately, the apple was claimed by three goddesses, who each believed that she was in fact the fairest. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite all claimed the apple for herself, and would not dare to give up the apple to one of the others. They quarreled for some time, and finally brought the disagreement before Zeus, begging him to make judgment. Zeus wanted no part in this, since he understood the wrath of an angered goddess, and did not wish to start any new grudges. So he passed the judgment off onto a pure mortal named Paris, who was a prince of Troy. Immediately the three goddesses began showering Paris with bribes, imploring him to choose each as the fairest. Athena offered Paris wisdom, skill in battle, and the abilities of all the greatest warriors. Hera offered Paris political control over all of Asia. Aphrodite simply came close to Paris and whispered in his ear. What she whispered caused him to immediately choose her. You see, Aphrodite promised Paris the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta, and since Aphrodite was the goddess of love and sensation, Paris was overcome with feeling for Helen and immediately chose her. This would have all been fine and dandy, except for the fact that Helen was already married. She was the daughter of the king of Sparta and had had many thousands of suitors. Each of the suitors had been powerful kings of various regions. Helen had flirted with them all, but respectfully declined. After a while, her father became afraid that any man she chose would arouse the jealousy of the others, and a war would immediately break out. To solve this problem, they went to Ulysses, who came up with a great plan. He proposed that each suitor should propose an oath of allegiance to whichever king Helen chose, so that whatever man was chosen as her husband would immediately have the support of a gigantic army. Since a man's word of mouth was worth a lot more at this time, and honor played a much larger role than it does today, the agreement was accepted and Helen chose Menelaus as her husband. Well, Paris convinced his father, King Priam of Troy, to allow him to go on a diplomatic mission to King Menelaus. While on the mission, Paris secretly met Helen, and true to the word of Aphrodite, she immediately fell in love with him. The two of them raced back to Troy, leaving Menelaus very upset and alone. Immediately, Menelaus summoned all of the suitors who had been rejected by Helen and asked them to raise their armies and come to his aid. True to their words, all of the rejected kings responded, and an immense army, the size the world had never seen, assembled and began their journey towards Troy. Ulysses, although he had tried to remain aloof from this war because a prophecy had been cast that it would be 20 years before he could come back to Ithaca, was finally persuaded into joining the army. He faked madness and hitched himself to his plow and pretended to be a horse plowing his field. A great leader and friend of Menelaus, King Agamemnon, placed Ulysses' son Telemachus in front of the plow to see if Ulysses really was mad. Of course, Ulysses veered away from his son, proving that he was sane, and was forced to join the war. The fleet of thousands upon thousands of warriors sailed to Troy to fight for the return of Helen. Unfortunately for the Greeks, the Trojans were just as skilled of warriors as they were, and had the impenetrable defense of an immense wall that surrounded their entire city. The war waged on for 10 years without either side gaining much ground. The reason the war remained at a stalemate for so long was because the gods decided to take much interest in this war, especially Hera and Athena. They favored the Greeks in this war and were constantly helping them in battle. Zeus had proclaimed that no god should help in the war, so there was constant bickering and fighting among the gods regarding who should be helped. In the end, most of the gods, including Poseidon, took the side of the Greeks since it was prophesied earlier that Troy would fall because of the actions of Paris. Since prophecies were held to be true no matter what, the gods did not even challenge them. One of the great warriors for the Greeks was named Achilles. He was the son of Thetis, who was married at the beginning of the story and whose wedding party started the entire conflict. Thetis had wanted her son to become immortal, so she dipped him in the river Styx, the river of the underworld that makes humans immortal. But when she dipped him in the river, she had to hold him so that his entire body would not be lost. She chose to hold him by the heel, which remained the only mortal part of his body. Now, before the war, Achilles had received a prophecy. If he chose to fight in the war, he would be remembered forever as the greatest fighter to ever live, but he would die in battle. If he chose to not fight, he would live a long and healthy life full of many children and wealth. Of course, he chose to fight, since he wanted his name to live on forever. No one dared challenge Achilles. He was a great warrior who never lost a battle. Unfortunately for the Greeks, he did not get along well with their leader, Agamemnon. Agamemnon was a very rude man who claimed everything for himself. He stole one of the women whom Achilles had taken as his own, which caused Achilles to withdraw from the fight, leaving the Greeks to fight for themselves. Without Achilles and his Myrmidon warriors, the Greeks found themselves losing the war. It was Achilles' family member, Patroclus, who finally persuaded Achilles to enter the war. Patroclus stole Achilles' armor and pretended to be Achilles in battle. He fought hand to hand with the greatest of the Trojan warriors, Hector, and was killed. Achilles was so outraged that he challenged Hector to single combat. Of course, Achilles won, and to show his distaste and disgust for Hector killing his cousin Patroclus, he tied Hector to his chariot and dragged him around the walls of Troy 3 times before returning to the Greek camp. Well, the war continued to be waged, but the Greeks could not come up with a way to get inside the great walls of the Trojan city. Finally, Ulysses came up with a great plan. He decided to trick the Trojans into thinking that the Greeks had left. His plan was to take all of the ships and men and hide them in a port a few miles away from Troy. They would leave a gigantic wooden horse with a prayer to Poseidon for a safe journey home. The Trojans found the horse and thought the Greeks had left. Unfortunately, they would not believe a young girl, Cassandra, who said that it was a trick, and they brought the horse into the walls of the city because they did not want to anger Poseidon by leaving the gift outside. Once inside the gate, the Trojans had a great party, and then all fell fast asleep at night, thinking the war was over. In the middle of the night, Ulysses and his men crept out from the inside of the wooden horse where they had been hiding, killed the Trojan guards, opened the gates, and allowed the rest of the Greek army to enter and slaughter everyone. The Greeks had won. Troy had fallen. During the battle, Paris became so outraged that his city was lost and his bride would be returned to her former life that he began shooting arrows as fast as he could, since he was a prized archer. One arrow hit Achilles in his heel, killing him instantly, since it was his heel that had remained outside of the river Styx. Nobody knows what happened to Paris, but the rest of Troy had fallen. The prophecy had come true. What began with an apple ended with a horse. This also leads to the saying, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts," since it was the gift of the Trojan horse that brought about the downfall of Troy. It was after this great war that Ulysses and his men set sail for Ithaca. A journey that would normally have taken just a few short months turned into the journey of a lifetime, because it was the gods who again decided to play a role in the life of a mere mortal.